I'm 79 years old, and I live alone. When I say that out loud, I can see the way people's faces change. There's this little flicker, right behind the eyes. Pity. They don't say it, but I can feel it. Poor thing. All by herself. Must be so hard. And I used to believe that too. I spent 60 years of my life terrified of exactly this. Terrified of empty rooms and silent evenings and nobody to talk to at dinner. My mother told me once, she said, "A woman alone is a woman forgotten." And I carried that sentence inside me like a stone in my pocket for most of my life. But here's the thing nobody prepared me for. Here's what they never tell you when they're teaching you to be afraid. The silence isn't empty, it's full. It's so full. It took me almost a year to stop flinching every time I noticed it. The first few months after Richard died, I couldn't sleep. Not because I missed him, though I did miss certain things. The weight of another person in the bed, the sound of breathing that wasn't mine. But what kept me awake was this ringing in my ears, this high-pitched whine that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I thought something was wrong with me. I went to the doctor, asked about my hearing, about my blood pressure. He ran tests. Everything was normal. And then one night, I was lying there in the dark, and I realized it wasn't ringing at all. It was just quiet. Pure, uninterrupted quiet. And I had never heard it before. Not once in 61 years of marriage. There was always something. Richard's snoring. The television he left on in the other room. His voice asking me questions I didn't want to answer. The sound of his disappointment when I gave the wrong response. Always something filling the space. And suddenly there was nothing. Just me and the ceiling and the dark. It took months before that silence stopped feeling like an accusation. Before it stopped feeling like proof that I had failed somehow, that I was being punished. But somewhere around the 1-year mark, something shifted. I woke up on a Tuesday morning. I remember it was raining. That soft kind of rain that makes everything outside look grey and blurred. And I lay there listening to it tap against the window. And I realized I didn't have to get up. I didn't have to make breakfast for anyone. I didn't have to be dressed by a certain time or have the coffee ready or remember to buy the kind of bread he liked. I could just lie there and listen to the rain. And that was allowed. Nobody was going to walk in and ask me what was wrong. Nobody was going to sigh because I was still in bed at 9 o'clock. The day belonged to me. Just me. And I cried. I lay there in my unmade bed, and I cried for almost an hour. Not because I was sad, because I was 78 years old, and that was the first morning I could remember where I felt like the hours ahead were actually mine. I don't make the bed anymore. Not the way I used to. For 60 years I made that bed every single morning. Hospital corners, pillows fluffed and arranged just so. Richard's mother taught me how the first week we were married. She stood in our bedroom with her arms crossed and watched me do it 3 times until I got it right. And I never questioned it. I thought that's what a good wife did. A good woman. You made the bed because an unmade bed was a sign of laziness, a sign that you had let yourself go. Now I pull up the covers sometimes. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I get back into it in the middle of the afternoon with a book and a cup of tea, and I don't feel guilty at all. It took me a year to stop feeling guilty. That's how deep it went. 60 years of being told that my worth was measured in hospital corners and 3-course dinners, and always being ready for someone else's needs. And now I eat soup straight from the pot. I stand at the stove with a wooden spoon, and I eat it right there, still hot, and I don't dirty a single bowl. My mother would be horrified. Richard would have looked at me like I had lost my mind. But they're both gone now, and I'm still here. standing at my stove, eating my soup, answering to no one. I talk to my plants now. I know how that sounds. I know people would think I've gone a bit strange. Maybe I have, but I have 4 plants on my windowsill, and I've given them names: Margaret, Dorothy, Ruth, and Evelyn. Those were my closest friends when I was younger. We used to meet every Thursday for cards. We'd drink coffee and complain about our husbands and pretend everything was fine. One by one, they died. Margaret first, 10 years ago. Cancer. Dorothy had a stroke. Ruth's heart just gave out one night. And Evelyn, she went slowly. Alzheimer's. By the end, she didn't even know my name. So now I have their names on my windowsill. And in the evenings, when the light gets soft and golden, I water them and I talk to them. I tell Margaret about the book I'm reading. I tell Dorothy about the birds I saw in the garden. I tell Ruth that I finally tried that recipe she gave me 40 years ago. And I tell Evelyn that I miss her, that I wish she was still here to play cards with me, that I'm sorry I didn't visit more often at the end. The plants don't answer, of course. But saying the words out loud, it helps. It makes the evening feel less like an ending and more like a conversation. People my age, the women I grew up with, we were taught that being alone was the worst thing that could happen to us. It was the thing we were supposed to avoid at all costs. You got married young because you didn't want to be the girl left behind. You stayed married, no matter what, because divorce meant failure. It meant something was wrong with you. And widowhood, that was tragic. Something to be survived, not embraced. I remember when my friend Helen's husband died. This was maybe 20 years ago. She was 61. And everyone, immediately started talking about what would happen to her. How would she manage? Would she move in with her children? Would she sell the house? The assumption was that she couldn't possibly live alone, that she would need someone to take care of her. And Helen, she played along. She let her daughter move in. She let everyone fuss over her. And within 2 years, she was gone. I don't mean she died. I mean Helen disappeared. The woman I knew, the one who used to laugh too loud and tell inappropriate jokes, she just faded. She became small and quiet and grateful. She became someone who didn't take up space, because that's what we were taught. That taking up space was selfish. That wanting something for yourself was shameful. I think about Helen sometimes. I think about all of them. The friends who stayed in marriages that made them smaller. The women who were so afraid of being alone that they chose to be invisible instead. I had a friend, Caroline. She died 2 years ago. Married for 53 years to a man who never hit her, never cheated on her, but also never really saw her. She used to tell me, "At least I'm not alone." And she'd say it like it was a victory, like she had won something. But when I visited her in those last years, she looked so tired. Not sick tired, soul tired. Like she had been holding her breath for 50 years and couldn't remember how to exhale. I don't feel sorry for myself, but sometimes, late at night, I feel sorry for them. For the ones who never found out what it felt like to exhale. The strangest thing I've done since living alone? I'm not sure I should tell you this, but there's something about being 79 that makes you care less about what people think. Last summer, on the hottest day of the year, I took off all my clothes and I lay down on my living room floor. Right there, on the hardwood, in front of the window. The blinds were closed, but there was still that golden light coming through, and I just lay there, feeling the cool wood against my back, feeling the air on my skin, and I started laughing. I laughed until I cried, because I realized I could do this. I could do anything. I could lie naked on my own floor in the middle of the afternoon, and there was no one to tell me it was inappropriate. No one to give me that look. That look Richard used to give me when I did something that wasn't in the script of what a wife was supposed to do. For 60 years, I performed a role. I said the right things, wore the right clothes, kept the right schedule. And here I was, finally, with no audience, no performance. Just me and my ridiculous, liberating nakedness. I don't do it often. But knowing I can, that's the point. Knowing that every single choice I make now is mine. I was married at 19. I had never lived alone. I went from my parents' house to Richard's house, and I thought that was how life worked. I thought that's what women did. And Richard wasn't a bad man. I want to be clear about that. He wasn't cruel. He didn't drink too much, or gamble away our money, or do any of the things that would have given me permission to leave. He was just there. Solid. Predictable. Like a piece of furniture you stop noticing after a while. And I was there too. Solid. Predictable. Making his breakfast, ironing his shirts, remembering his mother's birthday, being the wife. We had children, 3 of them, and I loved them fiercely. Still do. But even with them, I was always performing, always being the mother they needed me to be. And somewhere underneath all that, there was someone else. Someone who wanted to stay up late reading books no one else would approve of. Someone who wanted to travel alone. Someone who wanted to have opinions that weren't filtered through what my husband might think. I buried that person so deep, I forgot she existed. After Richard died, I found her again. It took time. It took a lot of quiet evenings and conversations with plants and meals eaten standing up. But she was still there, waiting, like a guest who had been stuck in a back room for 60 years, patient and dusty, wondering if anyone would ever come to let her out. I let her out. And she's strange, this woman I've become. She's not who I thought I'd be at 79. She's messier, more selfish, more alive. She doesn't care if the bed is made. She eats dessert before dinner sometimes. She stays up until 2 a.m, watching old movies no one else remembers. She talks to dead friends through houseplants. She's a little bit ridiculous. And she's free. Actually free. For the first time in her entire life. I go to the grocery store once a week. It's one of the few times I interact with people outside of my children and grandchildren. And I see it, every single time. The way the cashiers look at me. The way other shoppers glance at my cart, at my single portions, at my ring finger where the wedding band used to be. They make assumptions. They see a sad old woman buying soup for one. They see someone to pity. And I used to feel it too. That shame, that impulse to explain myself, to say, I'm not really alone. I have children. I have grandchildren. I used to have a husband. As if I needed to justify my existence by referencing other people. But I don't do that anymore. Now I just smile. I take my single portion of soup and my small loaf of bread, and I go home. And I feel something that might be the opposite of shame. I feel like I have a secret, like I know something they don't. That being alone isn't the tragedy they think it is. That it might actually be the opposite. The fear never fully goes away. I won't pretend it does. There are nights when I wake up at 3 a.m, and I think about what happens next. Who will find me if I fall? Who will notice if I don't answer the phone? I had a fall last winter. Nothing serious, just slipped on some ice in the driveway. But I lay there for a few minutes, on my back, looking up at the grey sky, and I thought about what would have happened if I had hit my head, if I had been unconscious. How long would it have been before someone came looking? Those thoughts are real. They visit me sometimes like unwelcome guests, But here's what I've realized. I was afraid of dying alone. I was so afraid of it that I spent 60 years with someone just to avoid it. And you know what? I was still alone. You can be in a marriage and be completely alone. You can share a bed with someone for 60 years and never really be seen by them. You can die surrounded by people who don't know who you are. That's a different kind of alone. That's the kind that doesn't even have the dignity of silence. So yes, I might die alone in this house. I might fall, and no one will find me for days. But I would rather have these years of real solitude than 60 more years of that other kind. The kind where you're surrounded by people and still invisible. I had a conversation with my daughter last year. She was worried about me. She kept suggesting I move to one of those assisted living places. You'd have company, she said. You wouldn't be so isolated. And I tried to explain to her, but I don't think she understood. I'm not isolated. I'm free. There's a difference. Isolation is when you're cut off from the world against your will. Freedom is when you choose how much of the world you let in. I choose. Every day I choose. I choose to have breakfast alone because I like the quiet. I choose to skip social events that drain me. I choose to spend my evenings with books and plants and memories. This isn't isolation. This is the first time in my life I've been allowed to choose. And I'm not giving that up. Not for company, not for safety, not for anything. My grandmother lived to 94. The last years of her life, she lived with my parents. She had a room in the back of the house, small, with a window that faced the garden, and she spent most of her time in that room, sitting in a chair by the window, watching the birds. I used to visit her sometimes. I'd bring her tea, and we'd sit together in silence. And one day she said something I've never forgotten. She said, "I've been waiting my whole life to be left alone, and now that I am, I don't have enough time to enjoy it." She died 3 months later, and I think about that. I think about how many women of her generation, of my generation, spent their whole lives waiting for permission, waiting for space, waiting for the silence they were taught to fear. And then when it finally comes, there's so little time left. I'm 79. If I'm lucky, I have maybe 10 years, maybe 15 if my body cooperates, probably less. And I refuse to spend those years apologizing for how I live. I refuse to feel guilty about unmade beds and soup from the pot and conversations with plants named after dead women. I refuse to move somewhere safer because my children are worried. I refuse to pretend I'm lonely when I'm not. What I am is awake, finally awake. After a lifetime of sleeping through my own existence, I'm awake. The silence doesn't frighten me anymore. It wraps around me like an old sweater, soft and worn and exactly the right weight. I know its shape now. I know its sounds, the ones that aren't sounds at all, just the house settling, just my own heartbeat, just the world continuing without needing anything from me. And I find that beautiful. I find it unbearably beautiful in a way I couldn't have understood even 5 years ago. If someone had told me at 20, at 30, at 50, that one day I would be almost 80 and living alone, and that it would feel like this, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have felt sorry for that future woman. I would have seen her as a cautionary tale, the woman who ended up alone. But I'm not a cautionary tale. I'm the opposite. I'm proof that you can survive the thing you were most afraid of. I'm proof that the cage you've been living in might not have locked doors. I'm proof that it's never too late to meet yourself. Even at 78, even at 79, even with so little time left. My friend Evelyn, the one who got Alzheimer's, she used to say that memory is a house. You live in it your whole life, and you fill it with furniture, with people, with experiences. And when the disease comes, It's like someone is going through the house and removing things one by one. First the small things, then the furniture, then the walls themselves, until you're standing in an empty field, not sure how you got there. I think about that sometimes. I think about my own house of memory, all the rooms I've filled, the nursery where I rocked my children, the kitchen where I cooked 10,000 meals, the bedroom where I lay next to a man I didn't really know. But there's a new room now, a small one at the very back. It has a window that faces the garden, and it's just for me, just mine. And I've filled it with plants and books and quiet and the names of women who understood. And when the time comes, when whoever comes for me starts taking things away, I hope that room is the last to go. I hope I can sit in it for just a little while longer, watching the light change, listening to the silence. Finally home. You might be watching this and feeling sorry for me. That's okay. I understand. We've all been trained the same way. We've all been taught that alone means sad, that quiet means empty, that a woman without someone is a woman without purpose. I used to believe it too. I believed it so completely that I built my whole life around avoiding this exact moment, this exact life. And now I'm here. And I'm telling you, from the other side of that fear, it's not what you think. It's not what any of us thought. It's strange, and it's quiet, and it's sometimes uncomfortable. But it's mine. For the first time in 79 years, my life is mine. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. Not for company, not for safety. Not even for my youth back. Someone asked me once, a younger woman at the doctor's office, she was making conversation while we waited. She asked me if I missed being young. If I could go back, would I? And I thought about it, really thought about it. I thought about my body at 25, strong and flexible, and capable of things I can barely remember now. I thought about the possibilities that seemed endless then, all the roads that branched out in front of me, and I told her no, because going back would mean going back to those rules, those expectations, that fear. Going back would mean giving up this room I've finally built for myself, this silence that took me 60 years to find. My youth wasn't free. It was a different kind of prison with nicer furniture. I would rather be 79 and awake than 25 and asleep. I would rather have these few remaining years of real life than all those decades of performance. That's not what she expected to hear. I could see it in her face. But it's the truth. The realest truth I know. I'm running out of time. I know that. I feel it in my bones, in the way mornings come harder now, in the way I get tired earlier than I used to. But I'm not afraid. Not of the ending. I'm afraid of not using the time I have left. I'm afraid of wasting it on guilt, on shame, on being who everyone else thinks I should be. I spent 60 years doing that. I don't have another 60 to waste. So I'll keep eating soup from the pot. I'll keep talking to Margaret and Dorothy and Ruth and Evelyn. I'll keep leaving my bed unmade and my evenings unscheduled. I'll keep saying no to things I don't want and yes to things I do. And when the end comes, whether it's alone in this house or surrounded by my children, I'll know that I finally lived, really lived, even if it was only for a few years, even if it came so late, even if I had to lose everything first to find it. That's what I want you to know. That's why I'm sitting here talking to a camera, saying things I never would have said 10 years ago, not because I want pity, not because I want company, but because maybe there's someone out there, someone my age or younger, someone lying awake at night afraid of the same things I was afraid of silence, afraid of solitude, afraid of ending up alone. And I want them to know that it's not what you think. It's not the end. It might actually be the beginning you never knew you were waiting for, The door you didn't know was there. The room that was always yours, waiting at the back of the house. You just have to be brave enough to walk into it. You just have to be brave enough to close the door behind you. And sit down. And listen. And finally, let the silence hold you.